They said the files were finally out. Names flooded timelines. Politicians, royalty, executives, celebrities, faces the world had been trained to trust. When Jay-Z started appearing in the noise, not as a headline, but as a connection, the arguing began. Dates, flights, photos, everyone desperate to decide what was real. But the release didn't expose a list. It exposed a shape, a network that doesn't move people. It moves access. It survives through handlers, favors, and the quiet logistics no one notices. I didn't learn this from documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein or anyone else. I was there. I was behind the wheel when names stopped being used, when windows went up, when routes changed. They trusted me because drivers don't speak. By the time I understood what the car was actually for, some roads weren't leading to studios anymore. They were pointing toward an island that feeds a cabal on silence. If you've ever worked a job where you're invisible but responsible, you already understand the seat I sat in. Driving isn't glamorous the way people imagine. It's hours of waiting, short bursts of movement, and a kind of silence you learn to wear like a uniform. You don't ask questions. You don't react. You don't repeat what you hear. The job isn't getting someone from one place to another. It's making sure nothing follows them there. That's why they like drivers like me. I started out doing regular work. Late night pickups after shows, hotel runs with back entrances, airports where you never stop the engine. You learn the rhythms fast, when to pull up close, when to idle a block away, when to turn the music up without being asked. You learn which doors never get photographed and which hallways don't exist on maps. Most nights it felt normal, tiring, but normal. I told myself it was just logistics. People with money needing things handled quietly. That's how the industry works, right? Fame above, machinery below. Someone has to move the parts. The rule in the car was simple: don't exist. No eye contact unless spoken to. Mirrors angled just enough to see traffic, never faces. Music stays at the volume it's set. Phones stay out of sight. If someone argues in the back seat, you hear it like weather. Present, passing, not meant for you. When the door opens, you reset. You don't carry anything with you. At least, that's what I thought. What I didn't expect was how people changed once the doors closed. Not everyone, just enough to notice. Conversations would slow down. Names would drop out. Time would get talked about like it was flexible, like it could be spent or saved. I heard phrases that didn't sound like business and didn't sound like art either. Words like alignment, readiness, legacy. They weren't said dramatically. They were said gently, like reassurance. Sometimes there were rehearsals in the car, not lines, breathing, humming, someone practicing a melody under their breath, stopping, starting again. Once a voice said, "Don't save it, give it all here." I remember that because the sentence didn't make sense until much later. I told myself it was nerves. Big careers come with big pressure. Who was I to judge how people prepared? The pay got better. The clients got more consistent. I stopped being a driver and started being the driver. Routes repeated. Schedules overlapped. I noticed that certain trips always happened after midnight, and certain destinations never showed up on my app history. I noticed how often phones went into pouches before the car even started moving. I also noticed gratitude, not the normal kind, not a quick thank you or a nod. This was heavier, lingering. People would thank me like I'd done something important, even though all I'd done was drive. Once, someone used my name without ever having asked it before. Another time, someone said, "I feel lighter," and laughed like they were surprised by it. That should have been the moment I asked for a different assignment. But when you've spent your life being reliable, you learn to trust routine more than instinct. And the truth is, I needed the money. I liked being good at something that didn't require explaining myself. Silence felt like protection. I knew the world was broken. Everybody does. You don't have to work in music to know that power doesn't behave the way it's advertised. I'd already accepted that part. What I wasn't prepared for was realizing that the car wasn't just moving people through the city. It was moving them between versions of themselves. The night everything shifted wasn't loud. There was no warning, no announcement, just a familiar route, a familiar pickup, and a feeling, sharp and sudden, at the base of my neck, like the air had thickened around the back seat. I kept my eyes on the road. That's when I understood for the first time that some destinations aren't places, and that once you drive someone there, you don't get to pretend you didn't know the way. By the time I realized the pattern, it had already become routine. It was always just the two of us at first. Me in the driver's seat, Jay-Z in the back, or sometimes the front, quiet, observant, already thinking 3 steps ahead of wherever we were going. The nights blurred together. Clubs, private rooms, after-hours spots that didn't advertise themselves. The locations changed, but the rhythm didn't. And the women were always there. They arrived early, or they were already waiting. They moved like they'd been placed, not invited. Too young looking to feel right in those rooms, but dressed like they belonged. They never caused scenes, never asked for attention. They stayed close, just off to the side, orbiting, without pulling focus. I never asked their ages. That wasn't my job. My job was to watch the road, to anticipate turns, to know which exits were clean and which ones weren't. Drivers don't verify details. We move outcomes. If you stop to question every inconsistency, you don't last long enough to notice the important ones. Still, I noticed. They were always with him, but he never acted like he was there for them. No flirting, no indulgence, no sloppy behavior. While everyone else disappeared into smoke-filled rooms and chemical confidence, he stayed clear-eyed. Water instead of liquor. Distance instead of excess. He'd nod, smile, say just enough to keep the night moving. He didn't participate. He managed. I watched him redirect people with a touch on the elbow, a quiet word, a glance that said later. I watched him extract himself from situations 5 minutes before they went sideways. He was never the loudest, never the messiest. He moved with purpose, like each stop was part of a route only he could see, pieces on a board. The women followed the movement. If he shifted rooms, they shifted. If he left early, they left too. Sometimes they'd disappear before we even pulled away, absorbed back into whatever system had placed them there in the first place. Other times, they'd get into the car, quiet and compliant, eyes forward like they'd been instructed not to speak. No one ever explained anything. That was the rule. I heard other artists talk big in the back seat about power, about indulgence, about taking whatever the night offered. He never talked like that. When he spoke, it was about timing, about positioning, about who was aligned with who and who wasn't ready yet. Everything has a window, he said once, almost to himself. The radio stayed low, the windows stayed up. There were moments I caught reflections in the mirror, faces half lit, unreadable, young faces, smooth and serious, like they were trying to act older than they were allowed to be. I felt a tightening in my chest more than once, a quiet instinct telling me something was off. I ignored it. Drivers learn early that curiosity is a liability. You don't ask where people came from. You don't ask where they're going next. You don't ask why some nights feel rehearsed and others feel improvised. You just drive, and he trusted me because I did exactly that. What stood out most wasn't what he did. It was what he didn't do. He never lost control, never chased pleasure, never got pulled under by the chaos he moved through so easily. It was like he was always standing just outside the current, directing traffic instead of swimming in it. That's when it started to feel wrong. Not criminal, not illegal, intentional, like he was being tested long before I ever realized there was a test happening. Like the nights weren't about indulgence at all, but about observation, measurement, seeing who could handle proximity without losing themselves. The women were part of that, I think. Not participants in the way people assume, but markers, signals, proof of access. I kept my eyes on the road, because once you start asking yourself why, you risk hearing an answer you can't unhear. And by the time I understood that I wasn't just driving between clubs, but between stages of something much larger. I was already too close to pretend I hadn't noticed the way he moved. Always ahead, always untouched, always arranging the night like it was preparing him for something that hadn't arrived yet. He got in first. That alone should have warned me. The door opened, and Jay-Z slid into the front passenger seat instead of the back, moving with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need the space behind him to feel powerful. He didn't look at me right away. He adjusted the seat, checked the mirrors himself, then finally turned just enough for me to see his profile. Up close, he looked calm, focused, not nervous, serious. "Listen," he said, low, not threatening, careful. "There's a very important person coming with us." I kept my eyes forward. "You don't talk to him," he continued. "You don't respond. You don't react. The only thing I want you to do is breathe and drive." The way he said breathe made it sound like instruction, not advice. "He's financing my future," he added. "Not just records, reach, legacy." A pause. "He's going to be talking about things that are not meant for public ears." I felt my hands tighten on the wheel. "The only reason you're driving tonight is because I vouched for you," he said, finally meeting my eyes through the mirror. "Don't mess this up." Then he turned back around. The door opened again. I didn't turn. I heard the sound of polished shoes on pavement. Slow, unhurried, like time was bending around the step. The air inside the car thickened before the body arrived. My chest felt tight, like I'd inhaled too deeply and forgotten how to let it out. The back seat filled without a weight shift. When he leaned forward, I felt his breath on my neck before I heard his voice. Soft, close, too close. "So this is the driver," the financier said. I knew that voice. Everyone did, not from shouting, from how often it appeared at the edges of things that never fully surfaced. Jeffrey Epstein, though the name stayed locked behind my teeth like a reflex I didn't dare complete. My skin crawled. Goosebumps rose along my arms, my neck, my scalp. The hair at the base of my skull stood straight up, every nerve in my body responding to something ancient and wrong. "Breathe," Jay-Z said again. Quiet, almost gently. The radio flickered. A fragment of sound repeated, just half a word, looping once before smoothing out like it had never happened. I focused on the road, the lines, the rhythm of the tires. Drive, breathe, don't exist. The financier spoke again, closer now. I felt his presence behind me like a hand hovering an inch from my skin. "I want my fingerprints in the music industry," he said, not boastful, matter of fact. "Not visible ones, imprints," Jay-Z nodded slowly. "That's why I'm here." "You understand access," the financier continued. "You understand talent. You understand how young voices travel farther when they're shaped early." The word early lingered. The car felt crowded, overcrowded, like something else had arrived with him, something that didn't need a seat. The space between the seats warped subtly, the air pressing inward. I tasted metal. My breathing shortened, then steadied, like my body had decided panic wasn't an option. "You're the right person," the financier said to Jay-Z. "You know how to open doors without being seen opening them." Silence stretched. Then the sentence that changed everything. "I'd like to invite you to an island." Jay-Z didn't respond immediately. I felt the pause ripple through the car. "Bring your driver," the financier added casually, like it was an afterthought. His breath brushed my ear again. "After you come to the island, I'll give you everything you want." My grip on the wheel went white. "And make sure you bring her too," he said. "I have a client who's a very big Aaliyah fan." The name landed without impact, and that was the worst part. No reaction, no emphasis, just placement. Like a chess piece being moved because the board required it. The hum returned. Deep, low, familiar now. We drove the rest of the way in silence. No one spoke again, but the back seat never felt empty. And that was the night I learned something I still can't forget. Some people don't get into cars. They arrive. And once they do, the road is no longer yours. The car delivered us. The aircraft erased the distance. I had never been on a private plane before. The cabin was quiet in a way that didn't feel luxurious, more like insulated. No announcements, no small talk, just the steady hum of engines and the sense that we were leaving something behind that couldn't follow. When we transferred to the helicopter, the world shrank even more. The rotors chopped the air into pieces. My ears popped. Below us, the water looked too black, too smooth, like it wasn't reflecting the sky so much as absorbing it. No one explained where we were going. We landed somewhere small, smaller than I expected, clean, controlled. I counted without meaning to. Buildings, lights, movement. It couldn't have been more than 20 people on the entire island. That number stayed with me, not because it was low, but because it felt exact, like the place had been designed to hold a specific amount of presence, and no more. As soon as we stepped off, the separation happened. Not abruptly, calmly. Someone I didn't recognize smiled and said, "You won't be needed tonight." My keys were taken. My phone was already gone. Another smile, another gentle instruction. I was walked away from the main compound and toward a smaller structure tucked into the trees, the side house. It was clean in a way that felt intentional, not welcoming. Neutral colors, no clocks. Curtains that moved when the air felt still. A bed, a chair, a bathroom that smelled unused. I realized quickly that I was alone. Not just separated, singular. I didn't see any other drivers. No voices, no footsteps. Just the water, constant and close, and a low vibration that passed through the floor every few minutes, like something heavy shifting its weight somewhere far away. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to do what I'd been told. Wait. But waiting felt wrong. Drivers aren't trained to sit without context. We watch routes. We listen for changes. We notice what doesn't repeat the way it should. The silence outside the house wasn't empty. It was arranged. And the longer I sat there, the more the hum from the car ride returned. Faint, but persistent, settling under my ribs. I didn't leave to expose anything. I left because standing still felt like a mistake. I moved through the trees the way I always move, slow, quiet, letting shadow do most of the work. The light from the main grounds didn't travel far. It pooled and stopped, like it had learned where not to go. From behind the palms, I saw the clearing. The circle was already formed. 13 figures stood evenly spaced, not touching, not moving. No robes, no masks, nothing theatrical. That was the part that unsettled me most. It looked procedural, ordinary in a way that didn't invite questions. Faces were dimmed by the lighting, features softened until they felt interchangeable. At the center stood the crowned figure, upright, still, calm, no chanting, no raised voices, no gestures that would read as ritual if you described them later. Just attention, focused, sustained. 13 points narrowing into one. The air tightened, the hum deepened, vibrating through the ground, through my teeth. I understood then that the sound wasn't coming from anywhere. It was happening to us. A hand lifted somewhere in the circle, not toward the center, but open, permissive. Whatever was being exchanged didn't need spectacle. It needed recognition, consent, alignment. The space around the center figure seemed to adjust, like the island itself was making room. For a moment, I couldn't tell what I was witnessing. Was he being blessed or being offered? The question didn't resolve. It didn't need to. The moment released without collapsing. The figures stepped back in unison. Conversation resumed in low tones, already practical, already moving forward. The crowned figure exhaled slowly, like someone coming up from deep water. There was no celebration, no relief, just continuation. I backed away before anyone turned. Back in the side house, I sat in the dark and waited for my breathing to slow. The hum lingered, faint but insistent, like an afterimage you can't blink away. That's when the realization settled. Not sharp, not dramatic. Heavy, final. Nothing was taken. Something was agreed to. In the morning, no one mentioned the night. Keys were returned, travel resumed. The clearing was empty when we left, the circle gone as if it had never been there at all. But the island didn't feel asleep. It felt satisfied. And as we lifted off, I understood why this place was never discussed. There was nothing to confess, only something to carry. The return was quieter than the arrival. Plane to runway, runway to car. No ceremony, no questions. The island receded behind us like it had already finished with whatever it needed. When the doors shut and the engine turned over, the hum didn't disappear. It softened, like something settling back into place. We rode in silence for a while. Then he spoke. "I've never experienced anything like that in my life," Jay-Z said, staring through the windshield. Not shaken, not triumphant, just stating a fact. "And I know you're judging me." I wasn't. I didn't know how. Judgment requires distance, and distance wasn't something I had anymore. "I'm going to get everything I want," he continued. "Everything." A pause. "You can come along for the ride if you want." The offer hung there, weighty and unfinished. I swallowed. The words came out before I could rehearse them. "I don't think I understand it enough to be part of what's going on." He nodded once. "I understand." That was it. No argument, no pressure. Understanding in his world wasn't agreement, it was acknowledgement. The road unspooled ahead of us, streetlights ticking by with mechanical patience. I focused on breathing, on lanes, on the feel of the wheel beneath my hands. When we reached my drop-off, he told me to pull over early. He opened the door, then stopped, one foot still inside the car. "This is where we part ways," he said. "I can't have you in my business anymore." I turned slightly enough to see his profile. "They'll get you if you do," he added, matter of fact, "and pray to God they forget about you." Then he was gone. No threats shouted after the door closed. No final look. Just the sound of footsteps moving away, swallowed by the city. I sat there for a long moment with the engine running, the hum faint but present, like a reminder that something had passed through and left an imprint. I didn't speak after that. I didn't talk because silence was the final test. Not loyalty, not obedience. Silence. The ability to carry something without trying to turn it into proof. Drivers who talk don't last. Drivers who remember quietly get released. I aged out. Routes changed. Calls stopped coming. New faces took the back seat where old ones used to sit. That's how systems protect themselves, by replacing components before they start asking why. So why am I speaking now? Because drivers age out. Because witnesses are allowed if they sound unbelievable. Because the safest place to hide testimony is inside a story people argue about instead of listening to. This isn't an accusation, it isn't exposure. It's a record of proximity. What I saw doesn't need to be named to exist. It doesn't need belief to function. It survives on alignment, on permission, on the quiet understanding that power prefers intermediaries, people who move things, people who don't look back, people like drivers. If you felt something listening to this, if your chest tightened, if a word lingered longer than it should, that's not fear. It's recognition, the kind that happens when a system brushes past you and keeps moving. Because the car doesn't stop when you get out. Pause. If you want more stories like this, stories that were never meant to be overheard, like the video, comment what stood out to you, and subscribe for more unseen horror stories.